Okay. Okay, so we're here talking with Steve again. We're just gonna open up the conversation and let's go. So, where were we before we hit record? We were
Well, we
kind of
were talking
talking,
about the
guys.
banning
Yeah, so we were
of
kind of
creative
talking
society and
before I hit
Alachua
record.
participants in Russia and Ukraine.
Right. And so obviously Michael asked, is that because what would they be afraid of? And they're just afraid of the truth getting out. And truth be told, I personally have had people depart from me because they don't want to hear about the cataclysms. They're
Sure.
like, all she talks about is cataclysms and she's changed. And it's like, well, okay, I really, in good conscience, can't keep bringing it up because it's something that needs attention brought to it. So if I have a platform and there's people paying attention to me, I want them to pay attention to things that are needing attention, right? And so
Sure.
I was not offended that the people wanted to depart from me because they're sick of me talking about cataclysms. But at the end of it, I hope to bring attention to this serious situation we're all in because we're all in it. There's not one person that is not that is exempt from being affected by it.
Yeah, the way I put it is I care more about people's lives than I do what they think of me.
Yep.
And even, normally it's the ones closest to you that are the quickest to turn.
Yeah.
Um, and I've been told straight up, if if we're gonna talk, don't talk about that stuff. Otherwise, we can't have a relationship. It's like, well,
I
okay
guess we
then.
don't have a relationship.
Okay then.
Yeah.
But it's
So
their choice.
so yeah. So we were talking about the raids that took place on the people in Ukraine and Russia, and now the Czech Republic is at risk for being hunted down for talking about it. And Michael's saying, okay, well, why would they care so much? And it's because they can't control the people. Once the people truly realize what's happening, our whole motivation for life shifts. We're no
Right.
longer cared about all of their stupid political schemes,
Right.
their psyops, all of the games. We're focused on things that actually.
Humanity shares one goal.
Mhm.
We're not divided anymore.
Yep. So you had an opportunity last weekend to go to Michigan and speak on a panel regarding the documentary The Impact.
Right. So the impact is behind an international group of terrorists, essentially, that have a direct. How can we say this? They are the direct descendants and students of Hitler, and all of this has been broken down fact by fact in the Impact documentary. Because what the Nazis were doing and the Third Reich were using were occult practices of manipulating people's consciousness. So they had very extremely close ties with the green hats, the yellow hats, and the green dragons. These are Buddhist cults that are practice magic, right? And these officers of the Third Reich learned these hypnotizing techniques on how to manipulate a crowd and how to draw attention from a crowd and use that attention as energy for their global plans. And essentially, the Third Reich, or um, the Aryan race, was supposed to take over the planet. Um, and those plans fell through, thankfully, because of America. But now those very people,
Well, because Operation Paperclip.
so now those
We
very
brought
people have
those
a
people over
vendetta.
here to work for us. That's so we basically just went over there and fought the good fight to steal their ideas and put them to use in a world agenda to dominate.
Essentially, yes. So these people are the descendants of them are still at it. Um, so the creators and like people that ran the Nazi apologetic party had students, and those students have students that are currently running what is known as anti-cult organizations. So the Rumble and YouTube channel and website are actfiles.org. It's anti-cult terrorism files.org. So essentially, those methods of manipulation are what allowed the Nazi party to convince an entire country that genocide was acceptable, right? That genocide of a specific group was acceptable. Now, there's a lot of theories and a lot of things that go into, the whole motivations behind that sort of thing. The Bolsheviks and World War One, and but what's important more so is what's happening now, right? And the methods of these manipulation, the methods of manipulation need to be known so that Americans in particular, because excuse me, Americans in particular are being targeted. And why? Because we are the beacon or the image of freedom and democracy. Now, maybe American citizens would beg to differ, but in terms of setting characters for each country, right, we're supposed to be known for freedom and democracy. So if freedom and democracy can be tarnished here, it can be tarnished anywhere. So that is why we are being targeted in particular. So the goal here is to first dehumanize a certain group or groups of people. So these anti-cult organizations, they use the term cult as a means of stigmatizing certain groups of people, right? Because it has such a negative connotation, right? People
Called the
throw
cult
around the
leader.
word and immediately it creates a negative image, right? People don't ask why it's a cult or what those people are actually doing. So essentially, what the anti-cult organizations are doing are labeling anyone with an opposing view as cults, and that's why this is so dangerous. Because technically, on a legal standpoint, there is no lawful term to nominate a certain group of people as cults. Therefore, nothing would hold up in court. So you have quote unquote professionals coming out, giving out a spectrum of what labels something a cult or not a cult. Um, so essentially, the dehumanizing aspect is meant to create an image in people's minds because we all think in terms of images and have that image be so divisive that this division becomes uh, fuel for conflict between groups of people. Now, you take this conflict and you inflate it with certain circumstances of civilian life. Okay. So let's take in America. The economy is the way it is because it's red or blue. The healthcare system is the way it is because of this group or that group. Um, so we see right now, there was a gentleman by the name of Stephen Hassan as well as Rick Ross, and they are anti-cult experts in America that work with these international groups of terrorists. Now, the reason why we use the word terrorists is because manipulating people's subconscious to instill fear and instill violence is an act of informational terrorism. So we can all take a close look at our news stations, and never is it a fireman rescuing a cat out of a tree or someone survived a disease because of a miraculous cure, or it's always has been the same. So if we go back to medieval times, if you were to put someone to the guillotine, what did you do first? You invited the entire city to the town square. so that you can show someone's head getting taken off. Why? To instill
Fear.
fear. Why? Hey, if you step out of line, this could happen to you. So stay in line and mind your business, or you'll be up here next. That's terrorism. That is instilling fear to control the masses. And now we have major news networks that do that on a global scale. And we have these groups that have taken it to a whole new level to instill fear within certain groups of people, right? So in America, when you think of a terrorist, let's just play with our consciousness here. Those of you that are Americans, when I say the word terrorist, what is the first image that comes to your mind? Let's just
9/11.
play with this for a second.
9/11.
Exactly. Exactly. A Muslim is the first image that comes to your mind. So when we find out what Muslims and their role in World War III actually have, 9/11 starts to make a lot of sense, which is all of this information is presented in the Impact documentary. If we think about moments that have instilled fear in the American populace other than 9/11, what's another instance that comes to your mind?
Uh,
Something that really shook the country.
Shootings.
Right.
School
What shooting in
shootings.
particular?
School shootings, Sandy Hook, those kinds that involve the small kids, the Columbine, things like that.
Exactly. Exactly. So when you find out that 9/11, Columbine, Waco in Texas, um, the bombing of the FBI building, and you find out how all of these instances are actually tied into one another, and that there is a certain group of people that are creating these acts intentionally to instill fear and to instill a sense of a lack of respect and trust in authorities. Now you have a country of citizens that hate their country, that it is a problem now, and that we want to rebel against it. We don't care if it collapses because it's a shit show. Now, who does that benefit? It certainly doesn't benefit us if it collapses,
Well, no,
right?
because they're trying to invoke us to a civil war. They're
Exactly.
they're trying to push us so hard that we turn on each other and it's like eat ourselves from within. Hmm.
Right. So the informational terrorism is a weapon that is far more powerful than any nuke, than any machine gun, than any helicopter, because the citizens themselves will destroy the country from a lack of, let's say, patriotism or trust, or um, because of these images that are implanted in our mind. So this documentary is all about, one, how do these images get implanted? Two, so the dehumanization of a group of people. Two, the destabilization of society. And then the normalization of this destabilized society, meaning that everything's a shit show and it is what it is. It's normal, right? And then eventually things reach such a peak that both people that are arguing with one another, they are begging for some form of order. So if we look at Nazi Germany before Hitler came into power, the country was at an all-time low. Everyone was poor and starving, and there was no work, and they were um, really in a bad situation. People were begging for someone to come along and bring order to the
Save
country.
us. This is the external savior program that everybody loves.
Exactly.
They love to have a
Exactly.
savior outside.
Right. So people, they play right into that. But in order to elect a totalitarian dictatorship, you have to destroy the country from the inside out first. So that is essentially what the plan is. And this is an international network of people working together. But from the outside, it looks like individual people just doing their own thing that are unrelated. So that's why the documentary is so important, because their ability to remain incognito is so good that if you didn't have this information, you wouldn't be able to put two and two together. So the Impact documentary is 8 hours long, because of these strings that have to get tied together. And everything, all the events that we had mentioned from 9/11 to Waco to school shootings, these are all acts to instill fear in a country and create enemies, artificial enemies.
Let's talk about the attempt on the Trojan horse. That was, I believe, another attempt orchestrated to I feel like he's the Trojan horse for the New World Order, or for controlling people. He has a cult. Like anybody who's worshiping it, it's the weirdest thing. But I think like the whole production of it, like it was so ridiculously unreal, like how that would even happen. But then he
Sure.
comes in the blood and the things and the weird bandage. It's like then everybody was wearing the bandages on their other ears. And it was like, it's like, whoa, this guy is like a master cult leader. He is like you mentioned the occult ways that the Third Reich hypnotized the crowd. He is that. Like he is a magus, a master magician. And everybody's just like so captivated now that if it doesn't go their way, there will be that uprising that they want,
All by design.
because they're all so
You
my
create an extreme.
not my president. But Adam poses a good point here in the comments. He says the salute is actually an occult technique that to enter the astral plane via the elemental forces. So he just noted that there. But so that's part of all of this. Like we keep getting played by these psyops, right? And this is part of this, these people's jobs, because they have that card game, the Illuminati card game.
Mhm.
And they have cards that they play literally on us that they know are going to either stir us one way emotionally, and now that they have social media to monitor all our responses, if we like, if we dislike, if we're angry, if we're sad, they have a catalog on each and every one of us who have an online footprint to get a sense of what the mass would best be manipulated by. And people just aren't understanding how deep it all goes, and how everybody is is kind of being swayed or siphoned of their own free thought by this great agenda.
Right. That is, there is maybe 2 or 3 hours of the documentary dedicated towards exactly what you just said in 30 seconds, how they do it. So, for example, the school shootings. This brings, there is a formula that you can see that is repeated with every school shooting. And essentially what it is a student that they target people, children with specific interests. And they know, let's say, for example, if a child is extremely interested in biology, they may also be swayed to death. Or if a student is extremely interested in space, technology, they may also be swayed to be influenced by guns as well. So there is a informational programming, they call it puzzle piece programming, where they send an information wave out to people. So let's say, for example, they want a shooting in this specific area because this area is suitable for their plans. Now, they target, let's say, an entire school district, and they send out a wave of information. And they keep close tabs on these children and how they respond to the information. So those kids very often are motivated by previous shooters' experiences. So, For example, the gentleman who bombed the FBI building, um, I'm forgetting his name, but he was at Waco. And the people that were at Columbine were influenced by the gentleman who bombed the FBI building.
I'll
And
admit, like, I was intrigued by the trench coat mafia myself. I was intrigued by that whole story at that time in my life. I was young, but
mhm,
that caught my interest. I'm like, what would make these guys go do that in their trench coats? And it was like
sure.
fascinating to me as a child to see, to try and understand that. So I see what
Mhm,
you're saying.
yeah, yeah. Um, and I know you have an affinity for life and spiritual values. And
Hmm.
most people, like myself, who truly value things that are of a spiritual nature, and the truth, I also want to understand the fact that I understand I am going to uh, close my eyes permanently at a certain point. And it's something that I think about. It helps me live my life better. So these children, they have certain interests that are targeted, and waves of information get put out. Events get put out around these people, and they narrow them down from 1,000 to 100 to 50. And they don't get in these kids' ears and say, "Hey, you should do this." They just use this puzzle piece programming to incite the violence within them. And these kids will go and carry out this act as if it was upon their own free will. So they don't know who's going to do it. They know one of them is going to do it, and it's only a matter of time. So this gentleman who um, looked to assassinate Trump is a victim of this puzzle piece programming. I think a lot of people think like they go to a kid, they hire them, they're an undercover X, Y, and Z, and they planned it all out ahead of time. It's normally um, injected into somebody's subconscious to make them act in a certain way. So it's a lot more subtle than people are led to believe. And for me, that was probably one of the more shocking things, because in my head, I'm just like, oh, these people are talking behind closed doors. They just set it all up and these events happen. But the way they described it in the documentary was quite interesting. So
That is interesting. That's an interesting take on it because, you know, I was where the Aurora shooting. You remember that? The guy in the Joker paint and he went into
yeah,
the theater. I thought this sounds like some kind of MK Ultra type thing because the guy in the trial was completely just he just looked like he was absent. So it almost looked like, well, do they use that? Because I know in the past the CIA had used programs to kind of influence people, but with technology now, I almost think because everything is frequency as well. And they have the technology to beam thoughts into people's heads, the advertising technology. The earbuds can now map your brain for the iPad, iBuds or whatever the heck they are. They're actually dissecting your brain waves and reading your thoughts. So I'm like, is there something now in this day and age that's more sinister that people don't even realize that they are being influenced per day by the frequencies that these devices that we've all welcomed into our home, into our classrooms, into our children's hands? Because my children get affected if they have too much tech. If
for
they have
sure.
too much screen time, I refer to them as tech demons, and I have to forcefully remove these, like basically pry it out of their cold
Yeah,
hands as they
yeah.
claw and gnash their teeth at me. And
Hmm.
I'm like, there's something weird coming through this device that is affecting them. Like these, I think it's like some kind of frequency, and even in some of the news broadcasts, I think that there's some kind of frequency or radio wave that's embedded um to make people
So
more docile or more
The Waco tragedy was one of the events in the documentary that was pointed out where exactly what you're saying, this technology was implemented. Now, why it all went so awry was, so the gentleman's name is Igor Smirnov. He was I believe, a KGB agent, and he was in charge of psychological warfare and creating technologies that would make people to do heinous acts, either on themselves or other people, right? So he had this strategy that would use animal noises. And within the animal noises, there were embedded messages. So, um, yes. So, Shaz, you are spot on. Says it sounds like a constant subliminal messaging through every form of media. This is essentially what we're dealing with. So, during the Waco tragedy, they implemented this technology. Now, here's the kicker.
To the people in Waco?
Yes. Now, the anti cultists, Rick Ross, who I mentioned before, was in direct communication with the FBI, and the FBI was willingly using Igor Smirnov's technology against them. So, this technology, and they have this on record that he said, well, if it didn't go right, the people within Waco would just slit their throats. And if it went right, then they would submit and they would surrender and walk out. Now, what I don't think they thought through was the fact that they were using this technology, but everyone that was there was hearing it.
Even the people of the crowd.
The people that were filming, the
Spectating.
people that were in the tanks, the people that were in the helicopters, everyone was hearing it that was there. And then pretty soon you have, 80 something women and children and elderly people being gassed, being burned alive. And they realized how much of a disaster it was. So they had to bring in false testimonies of people that were paid by the anti cultist movement to uh, create an image about those people that made it acceptable that those things happened. So essentially, this technology has been used before on American soil, and it's a big focus in the documentary because that is where a lot of this plan 30 years ago started. Was to you, this was like an experiment. Let's see how this technology works. Let's build mistrust in authorities by creating a disaster, right? And even the FBI and the police officers and the judicial system are all intentionally manipulated, or they're just manipulated by these anti-cult movements to carry out things in a certain way that would create chaos within the country. So now you have a bunch of Americans that witness a slaughter on live television across the nation, and everyone is up in arms about how the authorities could do such a thing. So immediately it builds this domino effect of events, hence the FBI bombing, hence the Columbine school shootings. Those school shootings became so popular, and they never talk bad about the shooters. What they do is they put their face and their name and they tell their story, but they never talk shit. So you create an idol out of these shooters. And other children see, well, this is how I can become famous. This is how people will know my name. And they wind up following in those same footsteps. And then you have more and more instances of parents in particular outraged that authorities could let this happen in their children's school. So you have more of an uprise against the authorities. And pretty soon you have these series of events. You have people that hate the authorities. You have people that are blaming each other for the destabilization of society, why things are so shitty. And now you have chaos in the country.
Well, do you think
So that
this could be? excuse me, do you think this could be used on law enforcement who just go around shooting people and killing people?
Absolutely.
Or innocent
Absolutely.
people that are unarmed,
For
just
sure.
they do the most heinous things to. And then obviously nobody trusts them because they victimize and do harm instead of protect and serve. They basically come out as the boot
Sure.
and just kick everybody's ass without ever being held liable. So I think it goes a little bit deeper than just that, creating distrust in people. The division
It's
is
both
coming
ways.
from, but this kind of stuff, they're like you said, these judges are influenced. And have you heard of gang stalking
No.
and things of that? There's actually covert operations that happen where they put targets, people who are maybe cult leaders, they label them. And then it's kind of like they put out information locally regarding said person who's speaking out or said person. And then there's a whole campaign that is ran on a localized level by people who are basically keeping an eye on the target, um, trying to set the stage for this said person to, go crazy or act out or inflict harm or something. And it's
Sure.
it's it's a form of harassment and torture that takes place because, say, somebody says, oh, this is a cult leader, we need to watch her, and then local law enforcement gets this file and they start their
Yeah.
schemes, and then there's a community of people who are also, volunteers to keep the community safe and watch the person, and it's like a really weird thing, and it's actually funded, and it's actually a thing, and nobody widely knows that this is actually happening in the cities across this country, that these
Sure.
operations where gang stalkers and organized stalking and targeted people are being harassed. They don't believe it's happening, and the people often who are being the targets, if they try and tell people like this is happening, people are like, that's not happening. You're crazy. That's not happening. You're delusional. You need mental help. And it's like, okay, well, that's how they're taking it out and doing it from a local level. So I wonder if those people are under the influence, because I know that some of the tactics that the targets have reported were like voice to skull, where all of a sudden they felt like their head was pounding and they were hearing voices audibly in their head and they didn't know where they were coming from. But when they would tell their family, I'm hearing weird voices like kill myself, or I'm hearing weird voices like go do something, and their family would be like, you're schizophrenic, we need to get you help. And
Right.
so they were taking out people one by one by trying to use these tactics on individuals that have been targeted by the state.
Sure. And
So
the leader, quote unquote, of Waco, um, said that he wouldn't surrender until he had certain information. And part of this strategy was to make him believe that he was talking to God. So during these phone calls that they were having with him, they were doing this implantation as well. And
this was
lo and
years,
behold,
30 years ago.
yeah.
Yeah.
So this technology has existed for a long time. And this is essentially what was being used in the Third Reich, to really, and granted, maybe it doesn't have to be electronic. It can also just be the way somebody speaks and the words, specific words that they use at a specific time, and how they gather a group think. And that group think is what carries out specific actions, right? So it truly is mind control at its highest level. So if humans don't see how this technology is being used against them, and I don't just mean electronic, I just mean this as a form of manipulating people, we'll fall victim to it, and we will be our own worst enemies. So I think, just to backtrack on our last conversation about all beef having to be squashed. It truly is now more than ever, because if we start to dehumanize groups of people, right? So let's go back to Trump supporters, for example. Yeah, that extreme was created intentionally. And now you have a gentleman, Stephen Hassan, who is in close ties with Fekris. And the president of Fekris is a direct descendant of Hitler. He wrote the book, The Cult of Trump, and talks about how he uses mind control. And that's one of the craziest things that you'll find in this documentary is it's one giant projection of these people. So they explain how these what they're calling totalitarian sects or cults or destructive cults, they are actually the ones that would be labeled a destructive cult. They are the ones that are trying to enforce totalitarianism by saying our way is the only way. And if you believe something otherwise, then we will, do something heinous. So an example of that is they guided the Communist Party in China directly against what they labeled Falun Gong, is a so-called cult in China that was actually what wound up happening is there were more supporters in the country that supported Falun Gong than communism. It became a direct threat to their order. And it was a very peaceful, there was, I mean, granted, I'm sure there were plenty of rumors that led people to believe otherwise, but what wound up happening was concentration camps were created. And this is within our lifetime. Over, I believe it was 100,000 people were used for organ harvesting. And this organ harvesting took place when they were alive. So Communist Party doctors would take these people one by one and just take their organs while they were pinned to a table and then discarded, right? So genocide has within our lifetime has happened because a certain group of people were able to be discriminated against. They took the yellow star and they turned it into something else in China, right? So we have to be on the lookout for when the media tries to paint a negative image in our mind about a certain group of people. And we have to know that this is a manipulation tactic so that we continue to fight against one another.
Right.
And this is exactly why the climate has to be hushed up, because in order for their plans to be carried out, we can't unite. And that is a big problem for them. And this ties directly to an off branch of the KGB as well. So now we have Nazi Germany, KGB, occult practices at the forefront of this movement. And it is to create another totalitarian dictatorship across the entire planet. So, this whole New World Order that we've all known about or have been hearing about, this is how they carry it out. So, we know that it wouldn't be like, hey, guys, by the way, we're just going to do this. Like World Economic Forum comes around and says, well, guess what? Everyone's just going to own nothing and be happy, right? It's like, obviously, we wouldn't accept that. They can't just come in and say, we're going to take all your shit. They can't do that. But what they can do is destroy everything by manipulating us to destroy it and then come in with the solution when we're starving for change, because we're quite literally starving.
They create the
And
problem
that's
and
how
they
it gets
offer the
implemented.
solution. It's they create the problem and then they offer the
Right.
solution.
Right. But they want us to create the problem by influencing us.
But they're creating it covertly
Yes.
by implanting and impregnating people's with these divisive thoughts.
Yep.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
And this is the kind of thing that you guys were discussing at the panel.
Right. So we were putting the people in charge of this on blast. So you guys can expect that creative society and a lot of participants will become mainstream very soon because we will be targeted in the United States. Um, this is simultaneously good because it does expose the connections, and any of the people that outwardly speak out against us, we know are directly tied to the terrorist organization. And then at the same time, it brings attention to the project. People will start to hear about the 12,000 year cycle. The downside is somebody storms my house and, puts me in handcuffs for simply wanting the world to unite and be protected. But things like that happen in end times. So it's, I ask myself, what side of history do I want to be on? If we have a history, and then I made my choice, right? But they're going to try and paint the picture of a cult, of a violent, whatever image they need to create to make, arrests more suitable for people.
Oh
They
yeah.
will make up those lies.
Yeah. Like I mentioned, they do that to targeted individuals individually. But a group like yours, a large society that's international, they've already started in these other countries, just, it's a matter of time. And like I said, the reason why they would want to shut you up isn't because you guys are doing harm or you're extreme. All you guys are doing is talking about climate cycles. That's
That's all.
and physics that could potentially have um the ability to help us. So
Right.
there's no harm being done, but this is what they don't care about because up until the end, they're going to try and keep as many people quiet as they can because they can't control us if we are out here having mutiny. And we're
Right.
out there like, no, we don't care about your stupid ass mortgages and your taxes and your stuff. We want to survive.
Right.
We need Bill Gates land to farm, and we don't want, our grains being exported, and we don't care, we want to survive. And people are going to start trying to come up with proactive ways and supporting things that could
Exactly.
advance that. And
Exactly.
they wouldn't have any control or power. And so of
Yeah.
course
And
they
that's exactly what it'll come to. It will, humanity will be its savior, because we will realize the system hasn't protected us, will not protect us further, and the only people that will is ourselves, and that will cause a fire of unification across the planet when we all realize, and creative society will be at the front of, um, explaining the 12,000 year cycle. So, and yeah, I couldn't agree more, Shaz. It's time to write our story to thrive instead of his story, right? Of just
right,
surviving.
because they're they've already suppressed the technologies that make electricity free,
Right.
water sources, purification that each and every person could have. It wouldn't have to have this huge municipal rotted pipe
Right.
situation. I mean, there is so much out there. Cars don't need gasoline to run. They can run off of water alone. We can
Hmm.
build things out of hemp instead of steel. We
Right.
get There's so much we could do different that's more conscious and more in balance with nature, that's more sustainable. But they don't profit if we do that. And so, of course, those things aren't going to be popular because anybody who's got those ideas, like the guy who created the water engine for the car, they killed him.
Right.
He was gone. And because that's a technology that would affect their business. What? We don't have to spend all this money on fuel. We could just go up to a puddle and grab a liter and pour it into this engine and we could drive for 200 miles. What? Yeah.
Yeah.
So they can't have people out there doing that because,
Sure.
you know, yeah,
Yeah.
So there
Yeah.
is an opportunity for us to take control of this catastrophe, really, right? But it's going to take people being in the right mindset for that. And I don't think that people are ready without like going through a level of difficulty to understand it. So I think the cataclysms setting in more frequently here are going to assist them with opening their eyes and looking for what the heck's going on. Um,
Right.
reading the mainstream stuff, like, talking about, they're like, oh, well, this happens at Yellowstone. No, it doesn't. It doesn't happen like that at Yellowstone, or else they would have never had a boardwalk built on that geyser. That geyser was dormant. Okay. They wouldn't have
Yeah.
had a boardwalk right there if that was something that they were expecting or was regular.
Right.
That was hurling boulders larger than humans
Right.
into the air. So they would have never done that if they had known that that thermal activity, that vent was going to spew. If they knew what was going on, that boardwalk would have been closed, and they would have said no, because this geyser's acting unpredictable today for the safety of all the humans. You got to stay away from this air basin of the, whatever, of the
Yeah.
park. But they didn't. They had no idea that was coming.
They're
There
not
were
going to give any warning.
no
Um, I think we had a forum that was focused around Italy, and there was a
Mount
giant section
Etna
on what's that?
at Mount Etna, or
So I know Mount Etna went off recently. Stromboli also went off recently. But Campi Flegrei is a technically a super volcano. And there's a population of a few 100,000. Um, and there are no actual, I mean, essentially their plans to create an official evacuation would essentially be too late. So, the forum does a good job at like interviewing locals there and getting their understanding and their opinion on living in a volcano, and understanding like the legal definitions of what would be suitable for an evacuation, or and that volcano in particular is especially over the last few months has been really active.
in what
um
way?
um
Increased
Earthquakes,
seismic activity?
a lot of seismic activity.
So has Mount St. Helens.
We're going to people are going to realize that they're one big network, and when one goes off, many are going to go off, and that will take the attention on the entire planet and say, what the fuck is happening? And I hope all people that have been throwing dirt on creative society or have heard about creative society and have not spoken up start speaking up. There has to be, I have faith in humanity that there will be an event that people flip a switch and start really making noise and asking questions. We haven't seen it yet, but it is inevitable. It's inevitable at this point. And we're seeing the signs, what people are starting to ask questions, but we need 8 billion people to start asking questions. And I think things are going to have to get pretty tough before that happens. And that's when you're going to see major censorship and the targeting of people that are talking about this, so that it just like that guillotine, you start talking about this is what's going to happen to you, right?
They
So
can't silence us all. That's why people need to come into their power and stop being so
exactly.
freaking passive and afraid to just speak their mind. That would really shift the consciousness if people would stop being cowardice and firmly plant themselves in their own authenticity, where they're like, nah, man, I have a different opinion about this. It's okay, but it's kind of that dystopia, right? Where people are afraid of free thought because Big Brother's always watching, and oh, I can't even think like that. That's a mind control program that's been instilled since the Bible was distributed from Rome. You can't think like that. God knows everything you're thinking. It's like it's weird kind of mind control, and everybody just, they put their mind in these weird programs, and then they never expand it, and then they actually feel convicted or guilty when they're thinking things outside the box. It's like, well, I shouldn't even be considering that. Like, coming out of a Christianity program, you're like, start looking into esoteric stuff or things that the church forbade you to look at. And you're feeling guilt in your heart. You're thinking, oh no, this is wrong. I shouldn't be doing this. But it's like, no, you should. You should be free thinking. You should be using your brain to dissect information and learn how to be rational and logical and all the things that they don't want you to do because they want you in a form, a lane, and they want you to walk in that within the perimeters of whatever lane and stay there. And if you try and veer out here, you're the black sheep. You're the one that's
Sure.
going against the grain and has more attention drawn to it because you're not part of the herd. You're like over here telling them, hey, stupid asses, you're going off the cliff. And they're like,
Mhm.
uh,
Yeah.
yeah, you are. Keep going.
Yeah.
That's what
Um,
you guys want.
sure.
That's
Yeah. And that's
that's where
the,
I have the hardest time recently. Is because I used to really want to help people and get them to see. And I'm like, this is not a thing that I have within my power to do, right? I can't make them see these things. They have to have their eyes open enough to ask that first question. That's where it starts, is when you ask for an answer,
yeah.
then it can be given to you. But until people start asking the right questions, there's no way to make them. You know what I mean?
Right. Right. Yeah. So in terms of trying to share this information, right? If someone hasn't asked the question, like what's happening in the world, there's a good chance you try and tell them and they're like, so how does this concern me?
Yeah.
You know, it's like, well, don't you live here? Don't you realize like you're going to either benefit or suffer from
Do
the
you have children?
circumstances around you? Yeah. So it's, and I think that's another sign of end times. This cosmic energy, if we imagine it as a spiritual surge, it simultaneously magnifies whatever exists. So we see those that are opening their eyes and seeing the world for how it is and seeing the truth. They look at, the opening show of the Olympics and they say, okay, like I see what's happening here. Right. And then there are people that just think it's great and it's trendy and it's, all part of the fun. And they go deeper and deeper into illusion. Right. So you see these two extremes happening where those that are, let's say, spiritually dead are walking the earth. And we do have the walking dead happening. That is essentially what a zombie really is. That person that has lost touch with the truth of reality and their soul and trying to evolve as a human being and is walking while they're asleep. um, and then you simultaneously have such a massive group of people that have lived their whole life in that slumber, and in a moment they wake up and they see the world. It's like they took off their rose colored glasses and they start crying and they're like, where have I been? And like, this has really always been this way? And like some of us that for whatever reason weren't born with the rose colored glasses on, or we're like, welcome to the party, like, let's get shit moving here, and it's a um it's an amazing thing, honestly, right? Because we're seeing what could be a golden age for our future when the entire world's values are based around the truth and based around creating a quality life for all people, and essentially humans taking the responsibility for their garden, right? So it's I see the trend going towards people waking up. It's just a matter of, will we act when we need to act? Um, because there is such thing as inertia, and this cosmic energy, as it accumulates, let's say it's protected and we create some form of shield, there is still an inertia. There is still a backfire, so to speak. So there is a deadline. There is an urgency behind uniting humanity and creating a unified scientific center. Um, so essentially, if not if, but when humanity sees what's happening to the planet, it will become an overnight sensation. Everyone will hear about the 12,000 year cycle overnight, or within a few days. And that's when all the targeting will really start to come to a head, because there'll be those who believe about the 12,000 year cycle and those who think it's just a coincidence, and those people are crazy, right? Um, so ultimately, the choice is up to humans. It's up to
Right.
us, you know? And like you said, you can't really take away somebody's free will choice. That it has to be up to them.
Well, I honestly, I mean, this is all speculation on my part, but our bodies also, being energetic and whatnot, I feel like certain people who vibrate at a higher frequency can withstand more external pressure because they're vibrationally calibrating at a higher level than the lower vibrational people, lower vibrational beings. I feel like that energy affects them, like you said, in a more negative way. And the ones that are high vibrating, it's like affecting us in a more positive way, where we're
Right.
kind of getting charged from it. We're getting more expanded in our
Yeah.
minds, in our understanding, in our hearts. We're growing from that energy. And the people who are kind of the walking dead, they're getting more like withered and oppressed
Constricted.
and yeah, and sick, like
Yeah.
physically sick.
Yeah. Um, so I feel like you would be interested in a video that was put out. It's called the reincarnations of the Third Reich. Along with those occult Buddhist practices, they were practicing conscious reincarnation through rituals and spells, so that the generals of the Third Reich would be reincarnated into new bodies with their memories, with their skill sets, with their understanding of who they were, and all of it, just in a new flesh. And which is why they had these nurseries where they were looking to breed this, Aryan race, but also creating new bodies for the Nazis. Um, and essentially,
So
if
you
we
think,
think about,
go
and
ahead.
this is from my understanding here, this might be a little off topic, but um, if a human has the information of previous lives stored, we have to ask ourselves, can the Walking Dead have a new uh, explanation behind it? Meaning that if those that are buried are coming to the surface within ourselves, and those are the ones causing, let's say, mass suffering, there's only one way out of that, and that is that high vibrational, or let's just call it love, right? Being grown within an individual, freeing itself of those past lives, so to speak, that are stored as an information field around the soul, and essentially creating a human who's free, who's doesn't get influenced by the negativity around them, because there is a so-called shield of love or high vibrational frequency that comes out of that person. And essentially, we have that capacity to teach people how to become free with the appropriate information. And by doing that and having a society that values that more than money and power and, greed, and all of the problems in the world go out the window, right? Because the whole foundation of society is built around evolving, essentially, right? But it's a little off topic, but I think it's just something for people to think about a little bit when it comes to, in the future, and we watch how people start acting and we simultaneously are seeing these cataclysms happening at a more um, escalating rate. It's the world's going to become an interesting place for sure.
Yeah, definitely is already becoming quite an interesting place just in the last 4 years. I've seen a huge divide in consciousness. Like I can sense if somebody is sentient or if they're just freaking lost to the programs. And it really it's almost tempting to just like disengage from them all and hermit. But
Sure.
I realized like that wasn't productive to do because those are the people who need to have access to us the most.
Yeah.
Those
The sick
people.
need a doctor.
Yeah. And not the one that's going to make you take something that's going to annihilate you.
Yeah.
Like they did
Yeah.
that whole thing. That was sad.
Sure.
So many people. I've never seen as many athletes, more
Just drop
athletes
dead.
died, more athletes died of heart attacks than in since that time than in
Yeah.
the last 38 years
Yeah.
combined.
Those are the last people you expect to be having heart attacks.
But unless they've got something in there messing up their system,
Right.
which they were forced to take in order to play the game. So it's like at each crossroads, people have a choice. Are you going to let fear run you, or are you going to stand in your power and your truth and your conviction and say, no, I don't want to play the game if that's what I have to do to play it. But that's where they serve ego. They serve the material world. And that's basically what it boils down to. It's like either serving that higher self or that lower self, because quite frankly, unless somebody's had their heart chakra activation, they're still in their lower nature. They're still in a fairly low vibration. It isn't until you get past here that your spirit truly becomes activated. So it is like the dead burying the dead, basically, because it's a realm of dead, spiritually dead people walking around with no true insight, no true sight or vision, compassion, care, servitude. None of all those things are lacking. So they truly do not know that love because they are stuck in that lower natured kind of way of existing. So it's truly been interesting to observe over the last couple years what people where they're falling on it all
Yeah.
because we were
If we
forced
go
into
back,
segregation. And you're in New York. They were
yeah,
doing the most up there with segregation. Like you can't eat at this restaurant.
sure.
You can't come in here. It's like what?
Yeah.
But people were allowing it. And I'm thinking, wow, how are we going backwards,
The
humanity?
crazy part is they built these tents and
Ah,
they would put the tents outside, but everyone could go in the tent.
the mind control of it all, really. It's like the mental, dude, the mentally ill. Like I remember one time I went through Chick-fil-A and the girl had a bucket for me to drop my money in. She walked 3 fucking feet that way, retrieved the money out of the bucket, and I'm like, why couldn't I have just handed you it from my hands? It did just the logic of
Yeah.
it all. I was like, wow, people are absolutely freaking dumb. But you don't want to be offensive to people, but at the same time, you kind of do want to be offensive because it's like, wow, are you an absolute idiot, right? Like you literally are a dumb dumb. But then you'd feel bad because you're like, dang, man, these people are sick with mind control.
Fear.
Yeah.
It all boils down to fear. Um, you can get people to do a lot when they're in those lower instincts, right? And we have built a society that is based around um, manifesting those lower natured parts of a human. Competition, right? Survival of the fittest. We come from monkeys. We're all animals, right? The fact that money gives you power, being a good human doesn't give you power. Money gives you power, right? So this is a system that we've been living in since ancient Sumerians, and intentionally, right? Because these are ancient methods of mind control, because we once were a society that understood consciousness and the a much greater in-depth understanding of the nature of our reality and how a human interacts with that reality, that information was taken and used for evil. And now we're dealing with the repercussions. The cycle is the repercussions of 6,000 years of slavery. So essentially, we are um, paying the debts of all of our ancestors for living the way that they did. And we have a chance, and that's why the golden age is such a big opportunity, because in order to free ourselves of the last 6,000 years, we really have to make dramatic changes, and the cycle is meant to induce those changes. So that means we were talking about this last time, a type 1 civilization, right? And the Creative Society has really laid out that format of what life could look like and how we would create a format that goes from a consumer format to a creative format. Um, and I think that's one of the bigger threats too, right? Because it makes everyone on equal playing field. It creates a united civilization.
which is
And
what
it
we
ruins all
need.
the elitist plans. So
Yeah, I think that's the true solution, honestly. We need that. People need to be humbled in the most like respectful way. But when I see videos of what they're doing to those unhoused people in California, it breaks my fucking heart, dude, because those people don't have anywhere to go. There's no solution for them. People just want them removed like they're some kind of pest, like they're calling pest control to have them eliminated from sight and discarded. And I just can't for the life of me figure out how there's so many fucking humans in the state of California that are not calling for Gavin Newsom to come up with some kind of a solution. That's his solution, to fund the decamp is, but you got vacant buildings on every other corner down there. But you can't profit if you
yeah,
open up one of those vacant buildings and let them have inside
right.
shelter. So you can't fund nonprofits or things like that that are proactive. Instead, you just want to stomp the people who are already desperate down and out because of this shit show of a reality down further into the dumps, into more despair. And it just makes me sick to my soul because I'm like, dude, that's us. Everybody is connected. So when
Yeah.
one portion of us is oppressed, we're all oppressed, but people don't see it like that because they're home in four walls and have food. And it's like, that's going to come to us all.
Yeah.
That's how it works.
I forget.
If you don't speak out for the people who have no voice, if you don't do that, that is our moral obligation. It is our moral obligation to stand up when there is injustice and speak. That is the Christ within us that is called to condemn the wickedness and the wrongdoing. And these people idly sit on their hands and watch all of these misjustices. It's going to happen to them. It'll happen to us all because that's what
Yeah,
happens when we sit down and don't do anything.
I'm
We
forgetting the gentleman's name or the exact quote. But it goes something along the lines like, "Oh, they came for the Muslims, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a Muslim, and they came for the Christians, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a Christian, and they came for the Hare Krishnas, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a Hare Krishna, and then they came for me, and there was no one else to speak up for me,
Yeah,
right?"
exactly.
And it's just one of those things that,
There's no
um,
one going to save us if we don't do it for ourselves. That's what I mean. We rely on criminal organizations. We're relying on talking heads in suits who work for a cabal of evil for profit to make decisions for us. Like that's where we're coming. That's where the people are doing. It's like you trust these people when they're serpent tongued and they do
right,
nothing but spew lies at the side of their face all the time to deceive you. Like honestly, but you're
yeah,
gonna think somebody like me or you has some kind of nefarious agenda. Like we're the threat, you and I. You and I are the cult
yeah,
leaders. You and I are the extremists because we're out here trying to unite the people and pull them out of this dark web of mind control they find themselves in. We're the ones who deserve to be hunted down and targeted and harassed and oppressed.
Yeah.
Wow. But
Yeah,
people
not
don't even
much has changed, if you
freaking
really.
nightmare. It's a freaking nightmare out here, bro. It is.
Yeah.
It's so weird. It's and people out there on that side of it, they don't know this side of it. They think like, oh, these two are just out there talking, and it's like they've never sat in the hot seat. They have no idea
Yeah.
what we're going through or what people like us go through just to bring the truth to people or to unite people or to even encourage and uplift people is almost frowned upon at this point.
Sure.
It's just so weird. I
Yeah.
can't wrap my brain around it half the days. I'm like, wow, this is actually the reality I'm waking up in today. Shucks.
Hmm.
That's too
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's hope, but it's gonna be ugly before. It's like darkest before dawn kind of shit.
I'm sure.
It's gotta get dark enough for these people to realize that they need the light.
Yeah.
Right. Because right now they have their lights on. Literally.
Right.
And when those lights go out and nobody has any life skills, like, oh, how are we supposed to do this? What are we supposed to do now?
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
how many people are going to be suffering because the cataclysms are going to take out power lines? They already have. There was a monsoon so powerful in Tucson, Arizona last night. It took down a building. It trapped some guy. There was some guy was missing. It blew cars over, semis over, flooded neighborhoods. And that's just like it knocked over power lines. Thousands and thousands of people without power over one storm. And they're still going to think, "Oh, well, monsoon season." No.
Yeah. And we saw the same thing with Beryl in Texas.
Yeah. And you guys seen tornadoes in New York. Like that's weird to me. I'd never heard of like Chicago had 3 tornadoes in one day. That
Yeah.
is so weird to me. I've never in almost 40 years of life heard of tornadoes in the city of Chicago.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is
We're
that
seeing the phenomenon everywhere. Just the abnormality is reaching the point where people are just like, well, that's strange. Well, that's strange.
they're going to start seeing soon, aren't they, Steve?
Yeah.
I think something big is on our heels. I think some kind of massive. Honestly, I think there's going to be something pop off in a couple weeks into August. And well, this is kind of my own spiritual stuff, so this is speculation. But going back to like that eclipse, I think everything is like on a timepiece, the sun, the moon, everything. And I think that set something into motion that was ushering in this cycle, honestly, because or in the US anyway. I don't know. I think that there's something coming in the US that's going to be big, like a big earthquake.
I mean, they were preparing for the 8.4.
That was weird too, wasn't it? Like, why
They
would
know
they
what's
be
going on.
running drills for
They
for
know
a
what's
huge
going on.
earthquake?
Um, but yeah, that fault line has all of a sudden became, a hot topic.
Why
So
is that?
because it's just activating. It's an ancient fault line that hasn't been active and now it is. And people just don't see the correlation yet. To
When you
to us,
say
it's
ancient fault line, what does that exactly
just
mean?
a fault line that hasn't been active. Now, at least not in our lifetime, and it's something that no one's paid attention to. It didn't maybe didn't even know it was there. Um, and now, when you see constant activity, um, it starts to become, I know that I don't know exactly where the red zone of the New Madrid fault line is in particular,
Hmm.
but yeah, I had a post that I did about it a few months ago. And then when they started running that drill, my post went from like, 60,000 views to 140,000 views within a few days. But this is This is the seismic map.
Oh, shoot. That's right there. That's a big red area right there.
Yeah, my glare is a little
And that's
shitty.
been going off like crazy, that area.
Yeah, if you could see it.
I can see it.
There
Yeah.
we go.
So that's right along the Mississippi River that runs from the
Yeah.
Great Lakes. So that would mean like that future USA map that they put out in the 70s, maybe not so far off because that connected the Great Lakes. Maybe that's why the Great Lakes are salty because the last cycle, some of the salt water got trapped up there.
Who knows? I'm not sure.
But when they were building the pyramids, they built the pyramids
For
for
the
this
cycle.
cycle.
Yeah. So just like a human has meridians, so does our planet.
Yeah.
The ley lines, the energetic grid lines. And just like, we may use acupuncture needle to, I mean, it's not an exact analogy, but you place these acupuncture needles on those specific meridians that help free up, you can call it prana, you can call it chi, whatever it in oriental medicine, it's chi or tsi. But the ancients knew very well about the cycle, and the pyramids were designed to extract the energy that was accumulating in the core. Um, and whether or not it was used for, technology, or it was sent to other planets or whatever it may be, I'm not exactly sure, but um, there's a reason why the pyramids are systematically laid across the entire planet, and they're all the same shape. It's not just that pyramids were hip and cool at the time. It's that the physics of it has specific properties that helps siphon this energy. So
Hmm.
I think that information will kind of unlock new metaphysical understandings about a human as well in the future, hopefully. But yeah, essentially that was kind of the gist. And there are underground pyramids that are inverted as well, pointing towards the core.
Really?
Yeah. And this is another reason why Alatra is being targeted is we have 5 to 12 hour long forums that go deep, presenting facts about things like this. And you obviously have to dig into ancient history and stuff, and they hate it because we're uncovering the truth about our past. So when you dispel the truth about the past, then the future can change because we know where we came from. We know it's possible. So, whether it's uh Paleolithic contact with extraterrestrials, whether it's pyramids, whether it's about the Holy Grail, or whether it's about the um there's so many topics of they're called kaleidoscope of facts. And there's a whole section dedicated to them on the YouTube and Rumble channel. The physics of crystals and what crystals were used for, and um, it's really, really, really fascinating stuff that shakes our entire understanding of reality. And they hate it. They don't want this information getting out to people.
Yeah. Of course they don't. Ha. They really, I mean, it's hard to believe that this is something that is outlawed. Just knowing about things that are true from our origins. They've done such a number on trying to re-educate people with lies and get them to stand on the falsehood of it. And it's just so,
It's what their system was built on.
yeah,
Their
it's
system was built on lies, and it collapses with the truth.
that is like when you talk about biblically, like the devil's a liar and the truth is not in him, the antichrist system is already here because this is a system of lies, and everybody rebukes the truth, meaning they would rebuke the Christ if the Christ that they believe is of a certain image or something was walking around today. They would do the same thing that the people did last time and say, no, liar, you're not the king of anything, you know? And
Mhm.
so it's just like the same story that's getting repeated, and nobody sees that this is what they're doing because they don't realize that they are that, because like you said, our memories from our past lives, it's always been us. We've done this time and time again. We just don't remember. But to take it back on that whole thing where you're talking about the consciousness and meditating into the consciousness, I think they already have that similar technology, like where they map out people's brains and then can put memories in them, like King Charles or the Queen. They could have had their brain mapped and all of their memories, right? Um, Downloaded into some file somewhere. And when they get old enough and of age to start comprehending that, those I believe could be reintegrated into their new, I don't know. I think that anything's possible with these psychopaths. Honestly, I think
Yeah.
they're complete psychopaths.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm right there with you. And it's straight out of a Black Mirror episode,
It
but
is.
yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. There's enough information on a person now to, upload that into, a new brain or a new consciousness or um but I think that I do know for sure that the elites have a long line of holding this knowledge secret for the manipulation of humanity.
Right.
And that sounds like such a conspiracy theory. And it sounds like something so outlandish to your average person. But we're talking, we're essentially talking back all the way back to and previously, but more particularly the last 12,000 year cycle that wiped out Atlantis. And Atlantis is essentially, you can imagine let's say the World Economic Forum had their way, had advanced life extending technology, and held that technology from the remainder of the planet, created a consumerist format where all people were asleep, and used these people like their puppets and just ruled the way they want to rule. Um, and the ruler of Atlantis, his name was El. His children, the elite, or the fallen angels, as people know them as, but they confuse it with the Anunnaki or the Nephilim or some other myths. But essentially, our history goes back from Atlantis. All the races that you see and stories of genetic manipulation were by his children, the seven fallen angels, and they were using specific genetic codes. And there is a group of people that have a hive mind gene from what we think of as, when we think of an alien, we think of a gray with almond shaped eyes. And there's a reason for that because that's embedded in humanity's memory. But that code was taken from the grays and used on a specific group of people to create a hive mind gene. This hive mind gene creates a massive ability to coordinate towards one goal. And if we look at the world today, I won't say which country it is, I won't say what people it is, but you look at the world today of a mass group of people who are extremely organized, and you can put the connections together. Now, This information you can see in all of the mythology. And for example, Zeus. Zeus is El. And Zeus and his children, the gods on Olympus, are El's children. You see the Iliad and the Odyssey, where you see all of these different stories that we've been fed, all tie back to this origin. So this elite class has been formed a really long time ago. And these people practicing these occult practices wish to see El return. This ties into Agartha, uh, people being sent underground, Hollow Earth theory, all of this. So it's the truth is stranger than fiction, I think. And I don't think most people are ready for that full story. But more importantly, is if we start at least with defending what's right, all of that stuff will come uncovered in time. But
And I think that's a good point to make. Like, we can all get lost in all of those details, right? We can get down the rabbit hole and try and figure out, is the Leviathan awake? Is this bloodline is what, and in reality right now, I feel that people get lost in that stuff because it is fascinating. It's like, wait a minute,
sure,
wait, this dot, that dot, everything's connecting. But it's like, is that productive for the task at hand? No.
no,
We must keep our eyes focused on what is productive, is we're alive in this moment, in the right now. We are here. We're going through this cycle. It is time for unity despite
right,
differences. If you believe in the Leviathans creeping up under the earth, great. If you believe that, that ship in the sky is a cloud, great. If you believe that we're all going to be beamed up into a magical place, great. But right now, in this moment, we should unite
right,
and focus on this. Well, we're going to get beamed up, so it doesn't matter. No, 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 no. Because if we feed into the delusions of the stuff, then people
right,
don't want to take action because they're like, well, it doesn't matter because I'm saved.
right,
It don't matter because I'm saved. It's like, no, bitch, nobody's safe.
yeah,
Humanity isn't safe. Ha ha ha.
right,
That's the thing. Your faith ain't going to save you. We're all at risk now, and it doesn't matter what it is that we believe about, our past or even our future. It's about
yeah. What's happening now
what's happening now
in front of our eyes?
in front of our eyes.
Yeah,
No speculation to it. It's all factual, can be
right,
presented scientifically and analyzed, compared data. I mean, it's
right,
all there. And I think that's like the ground to sink our feet down and ground
sure,
ourselves into the truth, because a lot of people, those beliefs, right? So when you start talking about like the bloodlines and the fallen ones, we lose them.
right,
We lose
yeah,
them because they're
that's
not
so
ready
true.
for that. But what can we tell them that they are ready for? Facts. Show them
Sure,
graphs, show them information, show them the statistics, and that is more apt to grab them. And with time, we'll all understand our true nature. We're all going to be able, like Sharon said, and rewrite the future in truth, right? But we have to first ground ourselves in the reality and take control of the vision. We have to take control of where the consciousness is steering, because as long as they're controlling the consciousness, we're going to keep manifesting their schemes. Because like you were saying on the documentary, the web that these people go out and throw on us, we are so unsuspecting of the levels in which they operate against us. It's sickening.
yeah,
The operations that they're running behind the scenes, the things that they're funding, the stalking that they're funding, the
right,
local law enforcement that are in on it. So we have a lot of stuff right here in the present that we have to unpack. And I
for sure,
think, you know, sometimes in my own experience, especially because I'm like one of those spiritual, I get this all the time. I'll lose them. Like I was at a sporting event with my kid the other day, and I was having a great conversation with this physical therapist, right? Local physical therapist. And we were talking about healing and shadow work and just, all kinds of cool spiritual stuff. But then I brought in the cataclysmic stuff at the end and I lost him.
Yeah.
I straight up lost him. He
Yeah.
checked out. He was like, you could just tell at that moment, he thought I was crazy. He's
Right.
like, okay, well, it was nice talking
You
to you.
feel it.
And
Yeah.
it's like, fuck, dude. Like, you've got to be able to listen and receive this truth. They don't
Yeah.
want to hear this. And that's
Yeah.
like, I find the hardest part about it is it's already hard enough to get them to see with the statistics, with the graphs, with the stuff. And then when we add all of the other stuff on there, then they're like, okay, a crazy person here.
Mhm.
So we have to kind
Yeah.
of be strategic in our approach with people.
Yeah. I found an approach when I have conversations with acquaintances and things like that. Um, I ask them if they've heard of a specific event that happened, right? So you can bring up Yellowstone. Hey, did you see what happened at Yellowstone? You know anything about that? Like, they'll be like, oh no. And normally I'll just say something like, I heard X, Y, and Z, like rather than say like this is what's happening and you should like create this like, oh, you need to hear this, and like
Yeah.
they're like, whoa, like relax, I almost like pose it as a question and just say like, I heard this theory that something was going on with our core and that the magma would be rising and a lot of volcanoes. Have you heard of that? And be like, no, what's that? Where'd you hear that from? And and I just kind of like start talking in that way. But in the beginning, I was like, yo, this is what's happening. You gotta see this video. You gotta start talking about it. Like this is humanity's future. And they're just like they turn off right
They
away.
check out. Yeah, you could feel
Yeah.
it. You could
Yeah.
feel the life leave their, it's like there's like a veil that gets put over them.
Hmm.
It's like
Yeah.
they literally their energy gets covered with a veil.
Yeah.
And it's almost like that there's some kind of dark energy that is in them that just cloaks them from
Yeah.
hearing the truth
Right.
about that.
Yeah.
But
I think that it's a self-defense mechanism,
yeah, it
right?
is.
It's
It's
like now I
cognitive
was all for
dissonance.
it until you started bringing up a threat to my life and the way, I have plans for my future. I have a vacation I'm supposed to be going on. Like you can't be talking to me about all this shit.
Yeah, because
Um,
they don't want to know. They
they
don't
don't
want
want to
to
know.
know.
It ruins. And that's the thing is like the one thing I really question is like, you know, people are so ready for a change. Like I had a student that came to me and he's like, I really just want to like sell my house and like get an RV and just go. And I'm like, that sounds cool. But at the same time, like, why should we all be living lives that we need vacations from?
We
You know,
shouldn't. I
no, we shouldn't. We
I
shouldn't.
know.
We shouldn't want to run away. We should be living fulfilling like lives that really make us feel human. And by taking in this truth about these cataclysms, uniting people, demanding change, implementing these technologies, we get closer to creating a world that we don't need a vacation from.
Exactly.
So people are ready for a change, but it's like, yeah, but I'm not ready to take responsibility for it. It's like, well, you can't have both. You can't have change and not take responsibility.
Right.
So,
Well, does anybody have any questions for Steve? I know some of you guys have been talking in the chat over here. Did anybody have a specific question for Steve? I know that Adam had mentioned something about the Madrid ley lines during the eclipse stuff. He was like, there's something here. He even pointed it all out. He did some work on behind that one, that post. So anybody have any questions that haven't been answered in the chat? Getting thumbs up from the little, okay. Well, that's good. I'm glad that, you know, we were able to talk and get it all out there. Was there anything else that you wanted to touch on, Steve, that you feel is relevant to our conversation or regarding, maybe what you had the panel on or anything like that?
yeah, I think just closing up and reiterating the impact documentary at actfiles.org. actfiles.org. You got there's tons of articles on there, and there's tons of parts of the documentary that are broken down into few-minute clips. So maybe if that's something that's more easily digestible for people,
In the
that's a
8 hours.
really good place to start,
Yeah.
right? Because the documentary is 8 hours long, so I understand that that's it is broken up into 7 chapters. So you could watch one chapter and give it a rest, and watch another chapter and give it a rest. But this really is the most important information aside from the cataclysms, because if our freedom of speech is taken away, if we are demonized for telling the truth, then we don't stand a chance against those cataclysms. So we have to be able to understand these manipulators of our consciousness, of our thoughts, of our culture, of our media, of our politicians, and not fall victim to the same manipulation techniques. And more importantly, or not more importantly, but on top of that, understand who's in charge and what sort of world will we live in if we dismiss this information,
Right.
right? And that is a totalitarian dictatorship. Under you will experience that on top of cataclysms.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's as close to hell as you're going to get. So meanwhile, the other option is an abundant world with life, right? So it's the crossroads are a very real thing, because we are in between these two choices right now. And I think the more information we have, the better of a decision we can make.
Adam, you have a question?
Yeah, man, and I reckon we're asleep for starters. We're still asleep. We gotta wake up. I don't know how to wake up.
Hey, it's still early here, mate. Crack on, will ya?
I
My question was, is there some type of correlation between the magma lines and the telluric or waterways, underground waterways that people have been bringing to attention?
from an electromagnetic perspective.
Yeah, so as in like water has an effect on the magnetics, and um, the magma has an effect on the electric system. So there's a correlation between the positive and negative
Is
effects
there?
of both those
Is that what
different fields.
is that what you're asking? Is there a correlation between the magma networks and the telluric underground water networks?
Yeah, that's the question.
I'm not too sure about underground water in particular, but I know in terms of our electromagnetic field, the poles are drifting and have a direct correlation to the rapid rise in magma, which I'm sure the electromagnetic field has an influence, on water. But I'm not sure exactly if those things are interacting. I'm sure they are in some way. The world seems to be one living organism, so I'm sure they're related in some form, but I'm not exactly sure how.
Okay, very good. Anybody else have any questions? Michael? Go ahead. You got to unmute, Michael. Adam, I'm putting you back in the corner. Okay, bye.
There we are. Hi. I guess my question is, all right, so we know these things are coming, right? And we also know that throughout our realm, this underground cities like everywhere, right? And we know that they've been building all these underground cities and underground dams across the world. Now, with this coming, right, is any of your solution, or is any of this thought of is trying to use some of this already built infrastructure for maybe survival of these cataclysms? Has that ever come to the forefront? Have anybody ever talked about that? Like I say, what would you do? All right, shit really starts hitting the fan. I mean, things are breaking up. things are really going bad. I mean, I'm just curious. I mean, I'm looking at it from a survival aspect. And if there is anything like that anybody's considered or thought about, and if these times are coming so quick, we should be considering some things like that. I don't know. I'm just thinking about, like, what do we do? Where do we go? Do you know what I mean?
Well, I think the underground tunnels would be flooded with molten magma.
That's a good point too.
Do you know what I mean? And that's what my
Yeah.
hope is that if anybody tries to flee, like the scumbags, that they're just
Yeah.
out and burnt. I don't.
Yeah, we
There's
did
an old
a
German
short-
story that says there's nothing more violent than a hungry person, man. So,
Oh, true that, man. Yeah.
man.
We
So
did
A
a
bear
short
or
film.
or a wolf or a lion, they've got nothing on us, man. When we get hungry.
what's that, Danny?
I said all these big, strong animals ain't got nothing on a human being once we get hungry.
Right, because we hunt the animals. So, But
Yeah,
the
man.
point
we
is that this is
we
going to
get pretty
happen.
clever.
I don't think you guys are
very
getting.
fucking aggressive.
I think that the mark might be being missed here, that this is going to be like, if it all gets to that point, then there's really nowhere for us to go. It's all, we're not even going to have to worry about really hunting animals because we're all going to be gone.
Yeah, well, people are
gone.
gonna get vicious, man. People are gonna get vicious, man.
That's why they're keeping it from the people, because they know that. So people aren't in a consciousness right now where they would be able to digest this information coming from an official authority. People, would hear
So you
this and
have to
there
leave
would
a bit of
be
steak out on the porch or something.
there would be two things that would happen. People would hear
Leave
this
a bit of food at
information
the front.
and they would say, oh no, we have to do something. Or people would hear this information and go into fear and it would be chaos. The more that they've studied us, the more that they realize that latter option would probably be the more common response to this information if they were to officially announce it, because they know that people in this realm are fear-based. They've engineered it that way. So they can't rely on us to all of a sudden be high conscious beings when we're not there. So they're not going to disclose this to us and say, okay, we're going to handle this like high conscious beings, and you guys are going to do this and that, because people aren't high conscious. Look at them. We live in a realm where people can't even self-govern, and they've engineered it that way. So they're not going to give us warning if we don't come together in our own way and be initiated into that high consciousness and form unity on our own. Then we're screwed, because they're going to wait until the last minute to tell us. And then, like I said, because the vibrational level of consciousness that most people register at is so low, they're going to go into this fight or flight survival mode, and it's going to be extreme chaos, and there's not going to be any organized unity. There's not going to be a scientific center. There's not going to be anything. That's why we're pleading in this way now, because they're not going to disclose it while we're in this state of consciousness. They've engineered us to be like this. So they can't disclose it to us, because all of a sudden, they're going to ask us to respect and organize and do. No, they're not doing that, because they don't want us uniting and doing the things. So we have to do this on our own free will, come together. And I think that's the test here. I think that's the test. Are we going to be able to unite and choose love over fear, and choose unity over division, and choose Christ over, and choose the path of the higher path over the mind controlled decay, totalitarian oppression? Or are we going to continue to swirl down into the depths and basically end up how we end up? And I think there's a spiritual element to this that is about us making that choice. Are we going to choose? What do we choose? It's like that choose your own adventure. Okay, here you go. You're at option A or option B. What do you choose? Well, I choose the higher path. Yeah, but the higher path's going to make people call you crazy. Yeah, but that path's going to make people put a target on your back, or you're going to have resistance on that path. Okay, but what's option B? This. Okay, yep, option A. Definitely. I don't care. Like Steve said early on, what side of history are we going to be on? You know, I would rather be a person who at least attempted to sway the consciousness or sway the tide in the right direction with my life here, and not be so self-absorbed and consumed by my own wants and my own desires and my own needs and my own aspirations and my own goals, and all me, I, because that's the spirit of Satan. That's the ego. That's the lower nature. We've got to step into our higher nature. We have to rise into our Christ and resurrect that. This is the second coming. This is the choice. Do you resurrect or do you stay dead, basically? So people have to choose this. It's not something that we're going to have warning on, and we wouldn't really have to worry about hunting if it gets to that point. There's no coming back from that. Once, like, that's why we're trying to stop it from getting to that point by making the choices now in our moment today to unite and erect something that's proactive that could potentially shelter us from some of the effects that we're dealing with going into this cycle. But people have to be able to choose that. We have to choose. We have to choose the good. We have to choose good over evil. You see what I'm saying? We have to choose love over fear, compassion over, blah, blah, blah. It's just our choice. And if we don't, then we won't be choosing what beast to hunt, because all the beasts will be dead too. There's not going to be a beast left roaming. Eliminated. Vapor.
Yeah, we're talking you know, category 6, 7, 8, 9 hurricanes, magnitude 9, 10, 11 earthquakes on a daily basis. It's not like, um and when the what is it called? The Mariana Trench. When the Mariana Trench goes, it will completely destroy our atmosphere, and Earth will just be Mars. And 12,000 years ago, it's exactly what happened to Mars. So there's no other option, a bunker will maybe give you another year or two of lifespan. And we did a short film to paint the picture of what it would look like if you chose to abandon humanity and instead go hide in a bunker. It will just be another year of suffering, underground, and eventually it won't matter. So, for another year, I'd rather take all of that time, my energy, my money, and my investment of building a bunker and put it into saving humanity. Because a year of living alone for that is it's a death sentence that's worse than, I think, going out on my shield. That's my opinion. But if everyone had that mentality of saving themselves, then no one would be saved. And that is the paradox that we're living in, because that's the mentality we've always had, right? And you watch these storms hit, or these predictions of hurricanes, right? Like, I watched so many people on their lives that were either, weather people or track storms, and the immediate response from everyone is like, what about this city? What about this city? What about this city? It's like, because they want to know for themselves, like, is it going to hit me? Right. And this whole concern about, just worrying about our own lives and not us as a collective society, as a collective civilization, is what got us here to begin with. It's why we let injustice roam free, because it doesn't affect me. Right. So,
Yeah, just like
um,
I was saying about the homeless.
right.
Like, how
Right.
could we? How could we not give a fly about people suffering and just be
Yeah.
so brazen to say, "Oh, I'm so glad that they're finally doing something." It's like, fuck you people, dude. You sit in your stupid ass house in a bed at night, and you feel happiness and joy that there's people who literally have nowhere to go, and it's illegal for them to do anything, and And we have the lords of the land that are extorting everybody, and it's not even their land. And it belongs to all of us. And you people can't even see through your own ego and just say, oh, well, at least me and mine are okay. It's like, can't with these people. And I try to act with love, Steve. I really do, but I struggle with that because I feel like there is righteous anger. And sometimes I spew that and people mistake that. Like, you're aggressive, you're this. It's just like, no, man, I just can't understand why you're so fucking dumb and under mind control.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can't figure it out why they
I
do
can
it,
relate.
you know? And
Yeah.
then they come for me. Like I'm somehow the person. It's like, no, I'm not under your mind control fucking programs, you fools. You guys just can't see with love. You can't see with the lens that has anything outside of your own needs in it. And it's sick.
Yeah. I think there's a bit of that there's a piece of that in everyone,
There is.
right? If we just talk about the dual nature of a human, right? We all have that, and unfortunately our society, the system itself brings that out in people even more so, right? So and everyone is kind of at their own stage of taking responsibility, and it's easy to come across threatening information and blame the messenger, right? But ultimately those days are over with. We can't keep blaming another person. We can't keep closing our eyes and shutting our eyes and closing our ears to the truth. Those days are over. That's not allowed to happen anymore. So I think that we all have the capacity to step out of that lower nature. With the right information, with the truth, it will become easier and easier to do so. I think with these technologies, with these the changes in society that would allow us to survive, will also create opportunities for a human to find out who they really are and what their purpose is in living a life is. And I think that comes with moral, ethical, and spiritual evolution on top of it. So
Yeah.
it's certainly something we can't do unless we do it together. So conversations like this, we'll look back on as pivotal moments that really changed the course of humanity's history. And as we said, we want to be on the right side. But to your point before, the big one is coming.
You feel so? You feel like it is?
I mean, if it doesn't happen tomorrow, it's going to happen in another year or two. So it is coming. That's for sure. And
I just quickly, man, I believe fucking us as spiritual beings need to chastise the flesh. You know what I mean? Like, we get threatened with death all the time, and we got to be able to say, "You can't kill me, motherfucker. You're the one that dies. I don't die."
Well, energy
You know what I
never dies,
Yeah,
right?
like,
Energy.
the material world threatens us every day. Like, you should do this. You got to do this. That'll kill you. You know what I mean? We need to really tell life who's the boss here. You know what I mean? Like, the material world needs to know who's the boss.
Yeah.
Did
yeah, I
that come
think
across
whatever we
properly?
put,
But
we
that's,
invest
you know,
our
that's why
attention
people
on.
fast and shit. You know what I mean? So you teach your body who's boss. You know?
Well, also because it's really good to
Otherwise,
regenerate
your flesh will
cells.
rule you. Hey?
Well, it's really good to fast and regenerate your cells. In this current society, we
We
consume
got to teach
way more
life a
than we need
lesson.
to.
I'm going to go outside right now and just jump clean off this roof, mate, head first.
Don't do that, Danny,
And I'll teach life a lesson, mate.
or you'll just go to the other place.
No,
But
what
I
I'm
don't
saying
recommend it.
there's it's a true story, though, eh? That's a fact, man. That's a fact, man. The material world's just threatening us every day. It needs a flogging. Straight up.
Well, I think the force here is Mother Nature is way bigger than us. And anybody who would dare try and say that they're going to command Mother Nature to stop what she's doing and fall in line is probably deluded in quite a way. because we need to surrender to her because she births all of us. It's like being obedient children to the mother who gives you life. You know, you're not going to stand there and be like, "Fuck you, mom. That's disrespectful and that's destruction." You're going to get backhanded. And if you know what I mean? But the material world and us, we run hand in hand.
No, but it's like Jesus when he was on the mountain and Satan was talking to him, right?
But
Jesus
that's all
already knew he was going to
allegorical,
die,
honey.
right? And Satan was saying, if you follow me, I'll save you, brother.
So
You can have
imagine
all
that
this
conversation
and you'll be
happening
alive.
inside someone's head. You know, the
Yeah.
allegory of the whole talk was, imagine that happening in somebody's head, because if you are the Christ and you're fighting your own devil and your devil is saying, I'll give you this world, you know, these people are following you, they're worshiping you, I'll make this can be all yours. I'll give this to you. Your ego's fighting your spirit saying, and your spirit saying, no, I don't want that. I don't want to be their savior. I don't want to be their Lord. I just want to help show them the way. It's the battle that is within that was taking place. There wasn't really like a cloven-hoofed, pitchforked man there standing saying, this could all be yours with one magical swoop of my freaking pitchfork. You know, it's like you have to think with the allegory of it all being about you specifically. The whole story of the Christ being about you raising into that Christ nature, you taking the cross upon your shoulders, having that crucifixion where you allow your old ways to die as you enter into your spirit person and resurrect as the Christ, where you allow that old egoic nature to be put on the cross and finished, where you finally emerge into your ascended way of thinking and serving and compassion and all those things. So it's really interesting stuff, but I'm getting off track. I apologize, Steve, to just, you look like you're like, okay, where is this going? This is a conversation I'll have with the good people another time. They've heard it all from me, whatever we do. But I'm so grateful that you decided to have another discussion here. And you know, it's always a pleasure gathering with like minds. I can't even imagine where we're going to be, but I do have hope that somehow, some way, the people are going to start to understand on an inner level is what it's going to take. It takes the inner standing, okay, of what's happening so that they start asking the right questions and taking it upon themselves to look deeper into the truth of things. And like you said, conversations like this always help.
Sure. Yeah. And, you know, we're all, you know, and you weren't off topic at all. I think every single one of us every day is faced with a decision to marry ourselves to the material, to power, to status, to protecting me and my own, right? Gaining influence over people and creating something for yourself here, but all that will turn to dust eventually, right? So if we can create a world that is based around things that transcend beyond the material, then we'll survive. We'll survive just fine, because then we'll really start to cherish our lives. So it definitely wasn't off topic, and that's a choice every single one of us has to make every day, right? So it is one big allegory for the battle that happens inside your mind, right? So if we can understand that the easy route is to do nothing, and it's a lot easier, we will reap what we sow, right? And that won't be pretty. And all of us will regret not taking the higher path.
Yeah. You know,
So,
that 9 Inch Nails song Hurt. Well, it's actually a Johnny Cash song. He covered it better than Trent ever wrote it, but Hurt. I hurt myself today to see if I can feel. What came to mind is the lyric, I wear this crown of thorns upon my liar's head. It's like, yeah, that's the reward of choosing your flesh, of choosing to see things going on and not saying anything, not standing up for what's right, being a passive, compliant, docile, dead thing. that just serves yourself with no higher understanding, no purpose, no love, that's your reward. You get a crown of thorns and upon your liar's head, and you get to just watch everything crumble because you could have done something and you didn't. And I think maybe that's the whole test of it, is how many people are actually going to choose? How many people actually are going to choose love over fear? You know, that's the final chapter to be written, I feel, before the big finale.
Ultimately, that's the deciding factor. If a majority of us choose love, it will be fine. And I think that's the judgment behind this all is, do we really deserve?
It's up to us to save ourselves. And
Yeah.
it's based on our hearts.
Yeah.
And are we casting pearls to swine? Or are we going to do what we know in our heart and our soul is right, and come together and make a change for the better to save, what we can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we're
Keep
playing our
fighting the
part.
good. Yeah. Keep fighting the good fight, my friends.
Yeah.
You guys are all
You guys
awesome.
too.
Everybody, I think, here has the hearts to choose the higher consciousness, to choose the higher path, to bear the cross, if you will. And it's always a pleasure meeting with you. And maybe, if ever, we'll just be around. You know what I'm saying? If you ever got anything interesting, or
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's
happy.
always a good time. I enjoy jumping on here with you guys.
Thank you.
Um,
I
if you
hate to
guys,
rush off.
that's
It's like
okay.
we
It's
could
getting
keep
late
going.
for me, so
Yeah,
I'm about good to go.
my son's waiting. He's taken me out to the movie to see Deadpool 3. That's like our thing since he was little, to
Ooh.
see comic movies, Marvel. I don't
Yep.
really like DC movies, but I still suffer through.
Mhm.
But they're getting better. Okay, let's just put that out there. But it's since he's been working, he told me, Mom, you'll never have to pay for another Marvel movie in your life. I'm always going to take you and keep our thing going. And so
Nice.
it's kind of like
Well,
a
Wolverine must be Australian, right? Wolverine's Australian.
tradition. I don't know. We're gonna find out how it
He's
goes.
the Tasmanian devil, man. No.
Yeah. So I gotta dip out and go get changed for that. But
Cool.
so much fun chatting. You guys always love,
Yeah.
and I will see you guys later. And
Much love, guys. Thank you.
Good
If you get a
bye.
chance, hit
Bye, everybody.
actfiles.org.
Hey, guys.
Thanks,
Bye.
guys.